out of his will, and I'm not willing to risk that. I'm Vinny's second favorite daughter. If you're trying to remember how many daughters he has, it's 2. Unless we count Morgan now, so that would make me his third favorite daughter. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight to celebrate my dad and Michelle. Look at how good looking they are. It's insane. Anyway, my dad and I go way back. I've known him since I was born. If you know my dad well, you could probably guess how laid back and chill my childhood was under his dictatorship. Holy hell. If you need me to paint a picture for you, I'm pretty sure on his calendar he has a bedtime for his plants. Here are just a few rules that I can recall from our childhood. Prohibited to experience fun for 2 consecutive days in a row. Copy all math homework onto engineering graphing paper, 1 number per box. And essentially avoid fun unless it's efficient. He wasn't a huge fan of gentle parenting. He was so rigid, I wondered if he was designing bridges or if he was one. I like to poke fun about how strict my dad was growing up, but I ended up learning the value of hard work, discipline, and grit. And I'm thankful for that. So it served me well. For example, I attended a prestigious private university and earned 2 degrees, while simultaneously under the influence of drugs and alcohol nearly the entire time. Never missed a party. So thank you, Dad. I would have never been able to pull that off without the academic discipline that you instilled in me. I hope that I've made you extremely proud. Look at me now, after you've paid for 5 years of a Catholic private college education. I'm a public school teacher. I know, you gotta laugh or you cry, right? I have this favorite picture of my dad. He's in the waiting room at the hospital. He stayed for the entirety of my 19-hour labor. And he had fallen asleep, and he's sitting there with his arms crossed and his head down. He likely wore himself out after 20 miles of pacing the halls, cussing out a doctor that treated me poorly, and screaming, "Is she gonna be okay?" as they were wheeling me to a very non-emergent C-section. You would have thought I was coding. After the fact, I realized when he yelled, "Is she going to be okay?" he was likely referring to the baby, my daughter, Violet. Because once my dad became a grandpa, he became a big fan of gentle parenting. It's actually called gentle grandparenting. But for a guy who is literally the human form of an Excel sheet, he is the ultimate dad. He has busted his ass our entire lives to ensure we had everything we needed and more. Never missed a recital or a game, and drops everything to save the day time and time again. He's our biggest fan, and you've simply never met a dad more proud than he is. We are very loved, and he never misses an opportunity to show us. Dad, you truly are Batman. Now for Michelle. Let's talk about how my dad met my friend Michelle. My first year of teaching, I joined a team with Michelle, Bree, Emily. Oh geez. Right off the bat, I was inspired by Michelle. Her organization, her passion for education, the way that she took no bullshit from any student or parent. No lie, I've seen her drag a student down the hallway with her bare hands. For legal purposes, I should mention, it was by his hood and he was grasping the rest of his jacket while she drug him to the office. But either way, it was badass. But in all seriousness, I was struck by her confidence and her presence, and it was a little bit intimidating. But those of us that are lucky enough to know Michelle well, that underneath that tough exterior is one of the most loving, selfless, generous hearts that you'll ever encounter. She gives without expecting anything in return, shows up for her people fiercely, and she loves deeply. Out of all of her incredible qualities, the one I think I'm still most taken by is her inability to age. I will never forget the first time she casually mentioned in conversation that she was a grandmother. She had mentioned before that she was young when she had her first baby, but by looking at her complexion, I hadn't realized she was likely about 10 years old. I mentioned my dad to Michelle a few times in conversation, and they eventually met through friends at a local bar. After they met that evening, Dai spoke to this, that Michelle called me into her room and said, "I have something to ask you, and I want you to be really honest with me." I thought she had been reported for the way that she manhandled that kid that she dragged down the hallway, and she was going to ask me if I was the one who contacted HR. No, I'm kidding. She told me that she met my dad and that he asked her on a date, and that her relationship with me was more important than going on a date with him, so to please just be honest with her about if it was okay with me. I was quiet for a minute. To be honest, I was just kind of shocked at the fact that my dad was initiating a date on a whim. Usually his idea of letting loose is slightly changing the color of the font on his email signature. But after the initial shock wore off, I gave my blessing. I walked away from that conversation really having no idea at the time who Michelle would soon become to our family. Since we are all here today, we can conclude that the date went well. When Michelle and my dad moved in together after he went over the ground rules and banned her from touching the thermostat, she wrote me a really beautiful card. And in that card that I still have, she wrote that happiness is a journey, not a destination. And it couldn't be more true. Over the past 8 years, our family has blended so seamlessly together. We've celebrated holidays, welcomed lots of new babies, thrown a lot of great parties, and shared a lot of laughter, and at times, a lot of tears. It has been happiness, and it has been a journey. It always will be. When you collectively share 5 children and 9 grandchildren, you are signing up for the journey of a lifetime. You've experienced both joy and heartache over the years, but here you are. You never wavered from one another. In fact, you learned, whether it's times of uncertainty, loss, celebration, or just because, that you can look to one another, pour some drinks, blast some music, and dance in the living room to wake up slightly hungover like a couple of kids. They do that. Like, they do. I've talked to my dad before, and he's like, I don't know, I closed a job at work, and we were just celebrating, and we were just dancing all night in the living room together. And honestly, if you have that, you have everything. So Dad and Michelle, I'm so grateful that neither one of you gave up on finding your happily ever after. You're the most selfless, devoted, generous, and loving parents and grandparents that any of us could ever wish for. You're deserving of this moment. You are deserving of this kind of love, and you are so deserving of one another. Please raise your glass and toast to the best looking couple any of us have ever seen. Vinny and Michelle.
Give it up one more time for Corey.